There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Issues and Insights for the month of August. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to the discussion today. My name is Shannon Full, the president of the Twin West Chamber of Commerce. I am joined today with numerous elected officials and, of course, our keynote speaker, Congressman Dean Phillips. So we'll get going in just a moment. I just want to give you a couple of housekeeping tips as we go through the webinar today. So we'll have an open opportunity and dialogue for you to have questions and answers posed to the Congressman. So I would encourage you to use your Q&A button that you see at the bottom of your screen so that you can post your questions at any time. I'll be monitoring the question bar and moderating that for our Congressman. So we'll give it just another couple minutes and then we'll get started. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Insights for the month of August. We look forward to the discussion today. My name is Shannon Full, president here at Twin West Chamber of Commerce. A little update, I know many of you have asked for an update on the consolidation with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. As you all have seen through numerous announcements at the Chamber, we're working through a consolidation of two very large regional chambers for the benefit of our members. And so we actually are in the final stages. Our joint transition team, which is comprised of 6 business leaders from the Minneapolis board and 6 business leaders from Twin West, have come together and really are working through the due diligence process to ensure not only a smooth transition, but really a responsible one, and one that has a lot of data and background to that. And so we are in the process of getting the final bylaws, the new board composition and governance structure. 6 strategic initiatives have been identified. Maybe I can say them, get them all off the top of my head. The first is advocacy and public policy, talent and workforce, economic and community development, partnerships and affiliations, member services and small business, and organizational excellence. So those are the 6 focus areas of the chamber, the consolidated chamber going forward. This is really a combination and a blend of the 2 chambers' strategic initiatives that we were already undertaking, and a significant amount of the work that the chambers have done in the past. So following this, we will have the joint transition team will meet for the final time. They will then make a recommendation to both boards of directors. The board of directors then will look at all of the data, including the legal due diligence by the attorney, the financial due diligence by our CPA, and then data and feedback that we got from you, the members, as we had 11 different visioning sessions about the opportunity to consolidate. From there, if the boards so choose, they will adopt or approve the consolidation. And then you, the members of Twin West, according to our bylaws, also have an obligation, a responsibility, and an opportunity to vote on that consolidation. So you'll see notice of a special meeting coming. I would highly encourage you to take the time to join us for that. It'll be a very short meeting, but a very important one. The bylaws do state we need a minimum of 30 of our members to vote. With a majority vote to move forward with the consolidation. So there's a little update on that. I was just pausing for a little bit of time while we got additional participants on. And now we'll move forward with the presentation. So today we'll follow the similar agenda as many of you have attended. We're actually hoping that we can start to do some type of a hybrid model. We seem to hear that hybrid word a lot now. That's one of the buzzwords. But to get some of, there's a lot of our members that are asking for us to be able to get back into an in-person setting. Obviously, we want to balance that with health and safety. So we're hoping we can do a hybrid that allows us to have video virtual for those that are interested and others that want to be there in person. But today we have the great pleasure of having U.S. Congressman Dean Phillips with us. It's always a pleasure having conversation with him, so I'm looking forward to that. But first, as always, we will acknowledge our sponsors. We could not do these events without our sponsors, and I will tell you firsthand that chambers all across the country are facing times that we've never faced before. This is a very challenging time for chambers of commerce. Congressman Phillips knows this. Unfortunately, 501c6s is what the chambers across the country are. We're not eligible for the payroll protection program, and so they're really and haven't also been eligible for any of the county, city, statewide programs as well. So the challenge that we face, obviously, is when we are significantly dependent upon membership dues from our businesses, of which are also hurting and trying to recover from this crisis. And then from the events and programs sponsorships, which now we're not having most of those sponsorships in person. You can imagine the challenge that we're facing. So this is why these sponsors that you see in front of you are even more important to us. And we have always appreciated that support, but now more than ever, we are dependent upon that support. So for our series sponsors, Timalex Corporate Ventures, thank you for your continued support. Sustaining sponsors you see on your screen with Alina Health, Abbott Northwestern, Centerpoint Energy, PCS Human Capital, Rasmussen College, Rudy Luther Toyota, and then Velocity Public Affairs. We also have numerous session sponsors. These session sponsors include those logos that you see on your screen with AAA Minneapolis, AT&T, CBiz, Choice Bank, Comcast, Scott Build, Goff Public, and Weber Johnson. Finally, Finance and Commerce is a great media partner in that they really help us to get the word out there about the issues and insights of the work that we're doing. And then Runway Analytics helps us to run some of the data behind some of the work that we're doing. So thank you to all of our sponsors. We are going to have a question of the day from our elected officials. We have a group of elected officials joining us today. And if you recall, we changed the format a little bit this year in that we are asking for insights from state leadership, county commissioners, and mayors, because we know the importance that each one of them plays in the economy and the ecosystem, and that we've got significant things that happen at all levels of government. So we're very interested in the topic and the question of the day today. The question is for all of our legislators, because once I start to call on you, I'll actually stop sharing the screen. So here's a little note for all of you. Make sure you jot down the question because it's going away in a moment. But when you think of the future of work, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, what changes in policy and funding would you propose specifically for education and workforce? Now, this is a big question because workforce encompasses a lot, and clearly education is at the top of everyone's mind, especially with the different distance learning approaches to education. So all of you at the state level, the county level, and the local level have different interaction, engagement, and guidance and overview on education and workforce. But if you could share briefly your thoughts on that, that would be very beneficial. So let me do this so that I can see what I'm doing here. All right, I'm just gonna call going down the list based on how I see you. So it is in no particular order, and there are no favorites, but I will start with Representative Jim Dabney.
Well, good morning, Shannon, and thank you for this opportunity this morning. Good morning to Twin West members. For folks who don't know me, just briefly, I serve in the Minnesota House, have for a number of years representing part of South Minneapolis, but I think I'm here this morning because I chair the Education Finance Committee in that body. When I think about education in the workforce, and when I think about education, I think about the 3 R's, which to me are relevance, relationships, and then resources. The 3 R's we need to pay attention to for today's students and today's economy. So I've got two things. One's a finance question, because you asked about changes in funding, and then the other's a policy. On finance, I think we need to do better on providing opportunities for students interested in career and technical education. And we could do that by providing just a little bit more support, financial support for schools who offer those classes. We need more people with those kinds of skills. Those aren't going to be outsourced, and it's a more relevant education for a lot of students. We want that. On the resources end, there's some interesting data coming out of states that require students to fill out the FAFSA. The high school seniors who are looking at possibly going on to post-secondary education, the FAFSA is the standard federal form that students have to use to apply for any sort of scholarships, financial aid at colleges and the like. And states that are requiring that, maybe we go there, maybe we don't, but are finding that more low-income students are going on to college because they're accessing student aid of various forms. And given the economy, I think looking at college affordability in a holistic way is an important strategy going forward to make sure that we get the workforce that we need. Thank you, Shannon.
Great, thank you, Representative. Representative Steve Elkins.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah. So I'll give two perspectives. One set of predictions related to business and then related to education. So the last 8 years of my career, I worked at Optum in Eden Prairie and their campus there. And because of the worldwide nature of Optum's IT workforce, basically every time they would acquire a company, they required the IT staff, and they didn't want to lose anyone, and so they would just integrate them into the larger company's IT staff. We ended up almost every project team that I ever worked on there had people from 8-10 different states. So my project manager might be in Southern California. Last project I had a fellow architect who was working from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, business people from Arizona and Florida. And as a result, almost all the meetings had to be held this way. Basically, we lived on WebEx at Optum, and so you find that and I think we've all found as well through this experience, that the first week or two, it feels really weird that you're spending 5 hours a day on WebEx and WebEx meetings. And then after about 2 weeks or so, it becomes normal and you adapt to it. But we definitely noticed that there were productivity losses because you couldn't walk down the hall to talk to this business person or this manager that you needed in order to do your design work. Literally, you would spend 4, 5, 6 hours a day on WebEx. And in my case, I was an architect expected to produce IT design documents, and there was no time in the day to do that work. And so I would find that whenever I had a deliverable design document to produce that was going to be a significant amount of work, the only time I had to do it was in the evenings. And so I think we're going to, anecdotally, locally, we're also noticing that, at first when companies went to this mode of conducting business internally, I think initially some of the companies were finding that there were kind of actual productivity gains. People were not losing time in commuting, they were getting some work done. But now that we've been doing this for several months, several of them are reporting that, hey, this really doesn't work for integrating new young employees into the organization and mentoring them. It's really hard to mentor through these kinds of platforms. So I suspect that businesses, especially in the knowledge economy, are probably going to end up requiring less office space. They'll go to hybrid models, I think, where people will be expected to come into the office a couple of times a week to interact with their coworkers. but a lot of business will end up being conducted this way. I know at Optum, so many people ended up working from home that you would go into the office and there would hardly be anybody there. And in fact, they started conducting badge surveys just to see who was showing up at the office. And they threatened to, if you weren't showing up at the office at least 3 days a week, they were going to take your cube away. And so I think there will be more hoteling at the office. There will be requirements for less office space, which is going to have an impact on cities because big Class A office buildings are one of the most lucrative land uses for any city from a net property tax yield point of view. I think the office market is going to be depressed for years. But I think this is going to be a semi-new normal. I think we'll end up a lot of knowledge worker, office-based businesses, economies. It's going to be some hybrid of what we're doing right now and having to be present at least periodically. And on the education side, I met with the Hopkins School District's Legislative Action Committee yesterday. They're still kind of feeling their way, and they're seeing things that I had observed like 15 years ago when I built the first data warehouse for Capella Education in Minneapolis. With the insights that Capella gained from doing the analysis against this data warehouse revealed to them that the people who were succeeding tended to be mid-career professionals who were coming back to get a graduate degree because they had a specific, career objective in mind. And so they were both motivated and mature enough to maintain the discipline to succeed in a distance learning environment. So I talked with the folks in the Hopkins School District yesterday. They said, yeah, they're finding that some students are doing really well in this environment. The ones who are doing well are the ones who are, well supported by their families, self-disciplined, self-motivated. But there are a lot of kids right now that, like every teenager, we joked about how, motivated, self-disciplined teenager is kind of an oxymoron. But there are a lot of kids who are struggling in this environment. The school districts themselves are still feeling their way. We're going to have to be very careful about making sure, doing everything that we can, and we're still figuring out what that is, to make sure that the kids who aren't as well supported at home are able to succeed in this environment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kelly Morrison.
Good morning. Thanks, Shannon. And good morning, everyone. I'm glad you acknowledged that is a very big question, Shannon, because it is. But it's spot on, because it is sort of the crux of the challenge that we're facing. And it's going to require visionary thinking, and it's going to require all of us to be open to new kinds of ideas and different ways of doing business and educating our children. In the near term, there's not going to be a recovery until we have better control of the virus. That's just period, full stop, to start with. And of course, in the near term, a bonding bill is going to be very important. We need to rebuild and reimagine parts of our infrastructure, create new jobs, and make sure that Minnesota continues to be a great place to live and work and do business. The workplace, I think Representative Elkins is exactly right. I think there are a lot of ways in which the traditional workplace is going to change a lot, particularly for our office and white collar kind of workers. We need to be supporting and honoring our essential workers, who are the people who make it all happen on the ground. And I think that ensuring internet access is going to be crucial both to the workplace and in terms of education. And that goes from greater Minnesota to our urban cores, where both struggle at times with internet access and having access to the devices that allow them to access the internet. That's going to be key. So my two would be bonding bill and ensuring internet access. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Let's hear from Senator Ann Rest. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, and thank you for accommodating my confusion about trying to get on this Zoom meeting this morning. I attended the meeting of the K-12 Finance Committee, the Senate committee, yesterday, where they had report from, I'm not on the committee, where they had a report from Mayo and then from MDE about the preparations for the fall and what the advice that's being given by MDE to the school districts, and I was really taken by the emphasis that was being placed on mental health initiatives, not just for the children, but for their working parents, of the challenges that are facing them trying to maintain a home and their place in their at work. And I think that we need to consider reinvesting in counseling in our school systems. We have given lip service to the notion that, oh, Minnesota, it's the worst in the nation. We got to do something about it. And we've done practically nothing. And those services, I think, are going to be in high demand, not just for the children, but for the family as a group. And that's where, when we talk about investments, it seems like to me that is an investment that has a tremendous return on it for efficiency and effectiveness in the workplace by their parents. I'm not just talking about the young single people who are, or just young people who are coming into the workplace, trying to come in the workplace as first-time jobs of any sort, whether they're professional ones or other, but the families that are really struggling, maybe not financially because they have jobs, but they're struggling to maintain their family stability and their efficiency and effectiveness on the job. And I think we ignore that major element in our lives at our peril. And we have an opportunity to do something about it, something positive about it. And I hope that we recognize that and invest in it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Senator Patricia Torres-Ray.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, for me, the most important thing that we need to do right now is just assess capacity of school districts, and assess the students' capacity, the community's capacity, and the students, and of course, the parents and families' capacity. What we learned early on, for instance, in one of the most diverse districts in the state of Minnesota, which is my district of Minneapolis, we learned that at the beginning of the pandemic, when we had to close the schools, a large percentage of students did not have access to a computer, and they were not connected to the internet. The overwhelming majority of the children that were not connected and didn't have access were children of color, indigenous children and children of color. We have tremendous poverty, lack of access and opportunities in these communities. And I don't think we have a good grasp of what it is, because we have an understanding of how we collect demographics in Minneapolis, but I don't have a good understanding of how we collect demographics in rural districts, for instance, where we lack connectivity for everyone. So it's when I think about the challenges that we face with low-income children, I also connect that with the challenges that we face with the workforce. We talk and talk and talk about preparing the workforce for the future, what we need to have, the talents, the training, all of these things that we need in order to have a labor force that is prepared for the century, for the jobs of the future. All of this is connected. And we don't have a good grasp, really, of what we need to do from K all the way to college. Do these students have access to this technology? If they don't, What do we need to do as a state, by region, by district, by demographic group? I think that we are not paying enough attention to how many resources are needed to do this. And the reality is that the impact is not just for the school community, it's for everyone. And I appreciate that you are doing this forum, because that's precisely what you're trying to do, to connect these resources, education, opportunities, possibilities that exist with, the jobs of the future, with, the needs that these small businesses have. I have to tell you, I have a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old right now, and I am constantly, asking them about what is that they would like to do right now in terms of, looking for future opportunities. They're unemployed, they are receiving unemployment, and they feel very discouraged. They don't know if this economy is going to pick up. They don't know if these businesses are going to open up. But they are, driving through Lake Street in my own district and seeing all of the devastation. And it's very hard to see, to feel hope and to see the future when you see this. So we need to do this reconstruction. We need to invest in these communities, and we really need to understand the needs of our students so that we can connect all of this.
Thank you, Senator, for your comments. We will move on to Commissioner Marion Green. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for hosting us. And good morning, Twin West members. Just a brief introduction. I'm on the county board. I represent St. Louis Park and also Southwest Minneapolis, and I'm certainly currently serving as board chair. So to dive into these questions, which were, I appreciated that you teed up specific questions, because it really got me thinking. So a few years ago, Hennepin County began intentionally looking across all educational and workforce development programs and initiatives and seeing how we could achieve better alignment among them. And what we've really seen is that one of the roles that we can play is serve as a table, sort of invite the table to build alignment across different programs to make sure that we're all operating collaboratively. So with our partners, we're working to create an interconnected set of solutions to meet the needs both of career seekers and of employers. Our overall goals, I would sort of identify 3 items. One is to close the skills gap. The second is to prepare people experiencing barriers to self-sustaining employment for promising career paths, and to connect employers to a diverse pool of well-trained candidates to meet regional workforce needs. Now, then arrived COVID-19, which of course has served as a catalyst to increase the speed on many of these ideas and drive innovation. And I do want to mention that what we're seeing amidst our many programs is a heightened demand for additional changes to our workforce and education systems, such as technology, incumbent worker training, and also maintaining the county's focus on disparity reduction, which is another space in which we're working aggressively. I want to highlight, before I give up the mic, a partnership, a collaboration that we've been having with Twin West Chambers on, specifically, I think through the Chamber Foundation, through mutual use of the online platform Elevate Futures. The platform's goal is to remove the barriers faced by individuals who are seeking new career opportunities. And our hope is to be better able to provide mobile-friendly, web or app-based platform for individuals to connect to opportunities, create resumes, participate in trainings that are badged. So there's sort of a gateway to entry, enroll in trainings, and so on. It's interesting to me, and here's where I'll pivot to sort of where would I spend the next dollar. I think I've been in partnership with a number of county commissioners from all over the state, and we have we agree on some of these needs, which are essentially technology and addressing the connectivity gap. So this is about both the gaps in the individual's technology, whether or not they have easy access to a computer, and of course that need is exacerbated by the demand for the requirement, essentially, of distance learning, and also gap in access to the internet. So Wi-Fi, getting onto the internet, in rural areas, that means broadband. As I mentioned, I'm serving on a panel of commissioners from all over the state, and these are issues that we have been talking about really throughout every other conversation, whether it's about public safety, food supports, human services, and so on. It's this issue of connectivity. So thanks so much for asking, and thank you all for being here. It's great to be in this esteemed panel.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jan Callison.
Morning, Shannon. Morning,
Morning.
members. Jan Callison. I'm on the Hennepin County Board. I represent the 6th District. That's all a part of 16 Western suburban communities, including Hopkins and Minnetonka. And the issue I would raise, and I'm not sure whether this is because I'm a commissioner or I'm a mother and a grandmother, is childcare. It has the irony of being too expensive for folks to afford while it doesn't pay a living wage for the people who work in that area. And unless we give parents a safe place for their children and we give children a good start, we will not have the workforce that we want and the economy that we want. So I would hope that's the issue that gets solved coming out of this.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Now we'll shift gears to two of our local elected officials. Let's start with Mayor Jake Spano.
Morning, Shannon. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to join you. I will move through this quickly because I know that we've got a lot of folks that want to speak to this. So my wife is an elementary school teacher here in St. Louis Park. I'm actually in Wisconsin right now, dropping my kid off at college. So I have two in college. So when we talk about college affordability, Congressman, if there's anything you can do on that quickly, that would be awesome. But my wife is a teacher in St. Louis Park, and she and I were talking about this in preparation for this morning because she's way smarter than I am. And I think she came up with and suggested two things. Number one, we need to stop standardized testing. We need to create problem solvers, not test takers. And standardized testing is not working to produce the outcomes that we want. Number one. Number two, we need to be teaching racially conscious curriculum and instruction methods in our school districts to close the equity gap, which is the second worst of any state in the country. On the workforce side of things, I would say that there's sort of two things that come to mind for me. Number one, I am part of a group of mayors from around the state. We call ourselves Minnesota Mayors Together, urban and rural mayors and suburban and exurban mayors from around the state. And we have been working for the last couple of years building relationships and better understanding of the challenges that we all face. We have a monthly call with Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. And the issue of rural broadband and internet access, it comes up every single time we talk about this. And so I would place an emphasis on that. And there's a certain amount of irony for me to say that, because when I started working for Senator Klobuchar back in 2006, rural broadband was her number one issue. And it feels like we are still in the age of dial-up internet in some parts of our states, and it's really creating challenges to them. And to Commissioner Green and Senator Patricia Torres-Reyes' comments about urban kids' access to the internet and connectivity, whether it's with devices or not, I would echo that. My wife found that last March when she was teaching from home, that even if kids had devices at home, they would get on the internet, and then as my wife would do a little bit of digging, she would find out that families were purchasing data cards instead of food or medicine so that their kids could stay in school. So for all of us who are sitting here and we say, well, kids are getting online, we see them online, we see them in class. Yeah, but we need to dig deeper into that. So I think the issue, whether it's urban or rural, the issue of internet connectivity have challenges. And the last thing that I would just say is that on the workforce side of things, I think there's I feel like there needs to be a bifurcation of our workforce in some ways. Stronger training in two-year colleges and stronger funding for two-year colleges in trades and skilled labor. But also, for those of you who haven't seen it before, I'd like to see a program like the federal government has a program called CyberCorps, which I would like to see expanded into other areas. So CyberCorps is a program where participating four-year colleges, if a kid goes to school there, the federal government will pay for each year of school that a kid commits to working for the government, some level of government in cybersecurity for an equal number of years. So they will pay up to 3 years. of a kid's education. And for 3 years, the federal government, state government, county government gets their expertise. And at the end of it, they've got skills that they can translate into the private sector. And I think that we need to see that done. And I'm using that as an example, but I would say we need to see that done in areas around engineering and chemistry. We need more scientists. We need more mathematicians. We can't just be a consumer economy. We have always been a thinker and idea economy, and now we need to sort of put behind that the muscle to bring those ideas to the marketplace more effectively rather than outsourcing them to other countries. So those are a few thoughts that I would have on this area, which I am woefully underqualified to speak on, but thank you for asking me.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Plymouth Mayor Jeff Lashy.
Hey, good morning, Shannon. Good morning,
Morning.
Twin West members. You know, I reached out to some Plymouth businesses just to get their feedback and their thoughts regarding this subject. And overwhelmingly, they said that what needs to be emphasized, what they're learning is the need to be those social skills, especially working remotely. They don't see this changing. I think a comment has been made, maybe you're going to come into the office a couple times a week, but how do you teach the upcoming workforce to work as a team in a remote environment? How do you develop and teach consensus building skills in a remote environment? And so there's a lot of those skills. I mean, there was a lot around communication and a lot of businesses saying that that the workforce comes out of school and they're not prepared to participate in business from a soft skills. And that's really being seen now because of the fact that everyone's remote. And those new students, I think, just like the comment was made on onboarding new workers in, it's hard to do that remotely. So even when they're onboarded, just being able to talk through and work as a team in a remote environment is hard. Some of the manufacturers that do a lot of agile development, how do you do that in a remote environment? How do you do a scrum in a remote environment? So there's a lot of difficulties where they want to come back, but there's also struggling with how do you run the business in a new model. And teaching those soft skills just continue to be emphasized as important. The other thing that was said was from a terms of a funding, I'll just add on that just from manufacturing that going to more funding for technical skills, we're going to see more and more manufacturing moving back into the United States. Almost all PPP is produced out of Asia right now. I was on a call with a business that has contracts with the federal government to obtain PPE, and he's working on trying to get that. And it's all coming out of Asia. We do not have the capacity right now and have not developed that capacity yet to do that domestically. And so, but as we see more and more manufacturing, we're going to have jobs coming into that sector as a growth sector, even after this pandemic is long since passed. So just having more funding going towards the 2-year technical colleges for that. Thanks, Shannon.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Wow, so you can see, members, that I talked about the breadth and depth of this subject and the criticality of education and workforce to you, the members, and to our economy, both here locally and our national economy. So we will shift gears here to the Congressman in a minute, but I just want to wrap this up by I'll put a little shameless plug out there because I think Commissioner Green spoke to this very clearly. We have been very engaged with our members, obviously before COVID, but now really with COVID around workforce and their greatest challenges. Many of them were touched on today. By far, there's a significant concern about education and what distance learning education will have for effects short-term and long-term on the workforce. There is a lot of concern about childcare, access to childcare, as Mr. Callison talked about. A lot around the mental health, the well-being, and just the sheer management of households when you have working parents that are now trying to teach and do their job. I will give the perfect example for me. We have a second grader and a kindergartner, and I am worried. I know through 11 weeks of doing distance learning, I had appreciation for educators prior to that. I have much more appreciation for them now because I know that's not my skill set and that's not my strong point. We're in an area that we've got decisions and choices to make, right? Where to put them, what to do. We have flexible employers. That isn't the case for everyone. So I am very concerned about that as well. I will tell you the piece around technology. This makes me really excited about the work that Twin West is doing. So over a year ago, about 15 months ago, we launched an initiative called Elevate Futures. We did so in partnership with many of our local school districts. I would highly encourage every single one of you to take the time to check out elevatefutures.com. Elevatefutures.com is the public-private partnership now that Twin West is doing. We have 10 school districts that we're partnering with already, 2 post-secondary institutions in North Hennepin and Hennepin Tech, and now a partnership that we're really grateful for with Hennepin County to use Elevate Futures in all of the community-based organizations for dislocated workers. And so Elevate Futures is a localized community crowdsourced platform that has over 1,200 video career cards. So if you're a job seeker or a student and you're trying to figure out your path forward, so to Senator Torres Ray, I encourage your 2 children to jump onto Elevate Futures. But it has exploration opportunities. There's reference to these badges, over 160 different badges. Mayor Washi, many of them are on essential skill development. We don't call them soft skills, we call them essential skills because there's really nothing soft about them. So there are badges for teamwork, strategic thinking, crisis management, communications, that type of thing. But really the other pieces we're seeing is companies are able to put their own profile on, post jobs, aggregate jobs, but at the same time, they're also able to identify where they would volunteer. So if they have employees that will speak in a classroom, job shadows, internships, virtual internships, mock interviews, our whole goal is to not just have this be a technology platform, but to have it be an integrated resource amongst our teachers, our students, our parents, and our job seekers, along with our businesses, really to create the critical relationships that are the stickiness and the glue for us to stay here and keep our employees and retain employees here. So the final piece I'll talk about Elevate Futures because this is really important. We have also taken into mind equitable access and accessibility in general. In October, we'll have another upgrade to our system. So it's going to be very similar to Netflix, where you can download movies and then watch them. Same thing here. When a student or a job seeker has access, they can download badges, they can download lesson plans, they can download career card videos. Then they can go and they can do that work and they can watch that without having access to internet. And when they have access, once again, it'll populate it back to their resume and their platform. So that's enough for my little pitch, but I will tell you, this is something we're extremely passionate about. But we need you as businesses at no cost to you. Put your business on the platform and get engaged with us. We need you, if you've got students or job seekers, to come on and utilize the platform. Again, no cost to the students and the job seekers. We can do this because of great partnerships that we have with Hennepin County, with the school districts, with businesses that are underwriting this work. So we're excited about Elevate Futures. Go check it out. There's my pitch. Congressman, the floor is now yours. So I will do the formal introduction, although I'm sure most of you have had the pleasure to interact, I'm sure many of you personally, with Congressman Dean Phillips, as he has been extremely accessible to us at Twin West and to our members. But Congressman Phillips, Dean Phillips is a father, businessman, civic leader, and representative for Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District. Dean attended Brown University before returning to Minnesota to earn his MBA from the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Business. After working at a variety of startup businesses, he joined his family business, Phillips Distilling, which eventually led which he eventually led, and later went on to help build Talenti Gelato into one of the top-selling ice cream brands in the country. He is now co-owner of Penny's Coffee, a small business with 3 locations. And in Congress, Dean is focused on campaign finance, electoral and ethics reforms, and addressing healthcare costs, global climate change, and our nation's gun violence epidemic. He's a member of the House Ethics, Finance, Financial Services, and Foreign Affairs Committees, as well as Democracy Reform Task Force and the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. So I will tell you that just on a personal note, Congressman, it's been a great pleasure working alongside you. We thank you for the support. My family thanks you for Talenti Gelato. I will tell you, we have three containers of it in the freezer right now, as it's my 5-year-old's favorite treat. So thank you, Dean. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Shannon, so much for the introduction and your wonderful leadership. To all of you, I'm so sorry that I had to postpone last week's visit. There are only 2 calls that would have precluded me from joining you last week, my mother or the president. And in this case, it was the latter. So forgive me, it won't happen again, but thank you for joining us today. So grateful to be with all of you. Hope everybody's health is good and you're enduring these difficult days. I know how tough it is as a business owner myself, but rest assured there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm here to listen to you, aggregate what I hear and bring it to Washington and do my very best to advocate for all of your interests and our whole community. And before I begin some remarks, and I want to get to Q&A as soon as we can, I'm reflecting on the forthcoming merger between the Twin West and Minneapolis Chambers. Some of you might know my great-grandfather, Jay Phillips, was the president of the Minneapolis Chamber back in 1961. I shared the same copy of this magazine during the Spirit of Enterprise Awards not long ago, but he wrote his going away remarks at the end of his term, and he was so excited about the construction of Metropolitan Stadium. So that was about almost 60 years ago. Better said, it's 3 stadiums ago, and rest assured, my great-grandfather never would have imagined sitting in Target Field, and he surely never would have imagined watching Twins baseball with cardboard cutouts behind home plate. But that's such a metaphor for what we are enduring these days. Somehow, some way, we will carry on, and that's our prerogative. And so many of you on this call and your businesses are the backbone of this entire community. So I want to say thank you and wish you all well. I'll give you a quick update as to what's going on in Washington. I'll share with you some of my perspectives and then turn it over to you for any questions that might be on your mind. Many of you know that I ran for Congress because I'm just appalled. I'm appalled by both parties, the lack of cooperation, the lack of respect in our national political discourse. And I've been party to a lot of organizations and businesses, institutions over the years. Never have I seen one more in need of comprehensive redesign than the United States Congress. The social design, the physical design, the organizational design, woefully constructed to achieve our mission. And rest assured, there's not one business represented by all of you on this call that could succeed in any way, shape, or form if half of your employees were working against the other half. But that is the culture of Congress. So I've made it my mission to try to break some of those cultural impasses and invest in relationships with my colleagues, particularly my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And that has proven to be very fruitful. Some of you might know that I authored the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, in no small part because of many of you on this call sharing with me directly why the PPP program had potential but was not working the way that it could for many of you. The covenants too restrictive, the components of 75% required for labor costs, only 8-week window to use it, weren't flexible enough. So I worked with my very conservative colleague from Texas, Representative Chip Roy. We heard the same things from our constituents. We built a good relationship. We authored a bill. We found a way to encourage and demand that Speaker Pelosi pull it out of the HEROES Act, put it on the House floor. It passed with a 417-1 vote, which means I've got a lot of work to do on Thomas Massey from Kentucky.
There we go.
And then,
Sorry, Congressman, you froze up for a minute there, but you're back, so good.
Oh, no. Where was I? Where was I?
All we heard you come back to was Kentucky, so.
Oh, no. Did you hear me talk about the Paycheck Protection Flexibility
Yes.
Act? Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yep.
Okay. In any case, yes. So the bill passed the House 417-1. I was joking that I obviously have some work to do on Thomas Massey from Kentucky, the one vote against the bill. It passed the Senate unanimously, and the president signed it into law a couple days later. Just an example, though, of how easy it is to accomplish things in Washington if people will just set aside their political swords, listen to one another, work together, and get good work done. The systematic separation of the two parties begins on day one. I've told you that before. Separate buses going to separate events, no intention to get us to know each other, share life stories, and be collaborative. So we have to do that on our own. That's why I joined the Problem Solvers Caucus, 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans. We work together every single week. We respect one another. My friend and colleague, Pete Stauber, the Republican from Northern Minnesota, he and I are working together all the time on important issues, including the one that kept me from you last week, which is trying to find a way through this nonsensical impasse on the COVID relief bill. But before I get to that, the other issue that I want to make you aware of is how the money influences either bad outcomes or too often no outcomes whatsoever. On both sides, Democrats and Republicans, depending on your committee assignments, we have what you call dues obligations. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, I'm supposed to pay the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee $250,000 in dues. Why? Because the members of the Financial Services Committee, which is a rather exclusive committee, have access to the lobbyists that write the big checks. And the idea is you collect the checks from the lobbyists and it flows right to your party's campaign accounts. Republicans have the same game, Democrats do it the same way. As the only member of Congress, the only one out of 535 that takes no money from PACs, no money from special interests, no money from federal lobbyists, or no money from my fellow members of Congress, I don't pay those dues, which doesn't buy me much goodwill from party leadership. And that's not a problem for me because we've got to change this inside money game that prevents so much good work from being done. But moving on to the COVID relief package, we've given leadership now ample time to negotiate a good deal. The House passed the HEROES Act over 3 months ago. Was it a perfect bill? By no means. Would we have expected at least an alternative from the US Senate? Yes. As of now, though, the only bill, COVID relief bill that has passed the House since the CARES Act is the HEROES Act. And for 3 months, there's been no progress on negotiations. So 6 of us from the Problem Solvers Caucus, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, met with Mark Meadows, the president's chief of staff, last weekend. We had a very productive hour conversation, and it won't surprise many of you. The impasse is not nearly as significant as portrayed by the media. And my suspicion is that egos have gotten in the way. And that is the greatest failing of our governance system right now, and one that I intend to work on quite diligently. At the end of the day, I do believe we will come to some conclusion, I think in no small part because of the work we're doing behind the scenes. It will include some form of an extended PPP program with perhaps even greater flexibility and more transparency. Clearly, the unemployment insurance benefit, the amplified benefit, is a big deal. A lot of conversation about the $600 benefit, creating some disincentive to go back to work. But clearly, those of you who, like me, believe that consumption is the engine of the economy and money in people's pockets is the fuel. And one without the other is big trouble for us. We've got to get money in the pockets of people who've been displaced by this rough economy. And my suspicion is it will not be 600. It'll be somewhere between 4 and 6. We are working on that right now. The speaker, I think it's fair to say to her credit, is holding out for amplified state and local funding. The state representatives on the call, the mayors on this call, to whom I send my salutations, know full well that if we don't get federal support to support our state and local budgets, that means one thing. That means a massive tax increase on all Minnesotans, and for that matter, every state in this country. Those are the two alternatives. I'm not a fan of taking on more debt, but states, and in the case of Minnesota, cannot borrow money. And I do not want to see a tax increase in the middle of a economic downturn like we're facing. So we are holding out for state and local, but I think we're going to reach a good conclusion. Childcare, support for schools which are trying to reopen, SNAP benefits, food stamps have got to be amplified for children who are hungry. Extending the census because we have redistricting coming up. The pandemic has made completing the census terribly difficult, and we want everybody counted. And then last, of course, what's been in the news is the United States Postal Service. And that's a big deal. The Postal Service is not a business, it's a service. Can it be more efficient? Yes. Must it become more efficient? Absolutely. I don't follow innuendo though when I make decisions. I try to do my own due diligence and research. And just 2 days ago, I had a number of USPS employees, managers, and letter carriers on a Zoom call just to find out what's really going on inside. And the bad news is that what's going on inside is very, very concerning, especially in the middle of a pandemic and just before a United States federal election. What I heard is the disruption inside is leading to mail delays of 1 to 3 days with great regularity. And that makes a big difference when we are going to see an extraordinary increase in mail ballots. 1 day could mean the difference between your vote counting and your vote not counting, not to mention 3 days. So we have hearings coming up actually today in the Senate, on Monday in the House. I'm returning to Washington later today for votes to preserve the service levels of the Postal Service. To sum this up, we need to ensure the Postal Service can deliver mail on a timely basis as we get to the election. Thereafter, do I support some reformations that make the Postal Service more self-sufficient and more efficient? Absolutely. But what's going on right now should trouble all of us. I believe that we'll get the deal done sometime soon. I'm going to be staying in Washington this entire weekend to work with my Republican colleagues, hopefully on a compromise that we might elevate. We'll keep you posted on that. And we should all be mindful of the forthcoming election. We have domestic issues. We also have foreign issues. I went to a classified briefing right before coming back to Minnesota recently that clearly indicated that Russia is actively meddling once again in our election. China and Iran perhaps would like to, but have not done so yet. But just to make you aware of how the meddling's happening, Russia knows they cannot beat us with their military. They cannot beat us economically. The only way they can beat us is by dividing us. And they're doing it, and it's working. All you need is the evidence of how masks have become politicized, how every single issue facing our country somehow becomes a binary political exercise, which works against us. The biggest concern is that they might, and in fact there's evidence already, that they will be spreading misinformation about how people can vote, that you can vote beyond the actual deadline, misleading people about where to go, anything to create confusion, discord, and reduce faith and trust in government. So I ask all of you to do what you can to ensure that people are mindful of where information is coming from and do our best to keep people educated about fact and truth. And that's not political, that's just, that's an American statement. The good news is that our state is a well-run state. I do celebrate Secretary of State Steve Simon. The primary in Minnesota went off without a hitch. Hundreds of thousands of mail ballots, absentee ballots, processed on time. The elections were called expeditiously. And we are very fortunate in Minnesota to be in that position. Not every state is, and that of course is a concern to many of us. I will also say that we have a responsibility as we recover from the pandemic and start rebuilding to look at what kind of country we want to be. How do we start employing more compassionate capitalism? How do we ensure that everybody who has an entrepreneurial dream can access capital, especially communities that are historically denied access to capital? How do we ensure people that work hard can put food on the table and take care of their kids? How can we ensure that healthcare in some form is available to everybody who needs it at a price they can afford? One of the blessings of living in the United States is our freedoms, but that also sometimes becomes a curse during times like these. It's very clear we don't have a healthcare system. We have sick care, and it's not even systematic. That is why we in the United States have endured the very worst outcomes of the COVID crisis of almost any nation in the entire world. And we've got to do some reckoning. And I ask all of you on this call, business owners, entrepreneurs, people with ideas and innovative perspectives, we got to talk with one another more about how we can do this better, because the exceptional America to which I'm accustomed, in which I was raised and have come to believe deeply in, is at risk if we don't start working together, regardless of our political perspectives. We've got to unify, and that's going to become an increasing focus of mine and so many. I'm working on a few bills I'll share with you. One is the new Business Preservation Act, recognizing that as we rebuild, I want to make sure that capital is available to entrepreneurs in the heartland, right here in Minnesota, particularly women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses that are often denied access to capital. There's going to be some destruction. It already is happening. There's also going to be opportunity for new businesses. And I want to work with the Chamber on finding ways to ensure capital is available to those who have business dreams. I've also working on the Ignite American Innovation Act, which would monetize net operating losses, NOLs, which would be helpful to many. And also looking at more broad ways to dedicate capital to be shared, public capital be shared with private capital to flow to new businesses more broadly. And as I talk about compassionate capitalism, I encourage some of you to do what you can to identify ways to help me, educate me about ideas you have to make our communities more successful, to reduce inequities, and provide more opportunity to everybody, especially young kids who are denied even the access to dreams. How can we get kids out of schools in our community and close not just the achievement gap, but the exposure gap? Many of you operate fascinating businesses. Consider ways that you can work with schools and get kids to come on a field trip to see your business. What does a factory look like? What does a hospital look like? What does an advertising agency look like? What does a retail store look like? If we can get kids to see what's possible, we ignite a dream in them, and then all they need is someone to believe in them. And each of you on this call can play a role in that outcome, and can't wait to work with you. So with that, I will say, as we emerge from the crisis, we've got to find some way to do a better national testing and tracing program. We're the only country in the world that seems to have failed in doing so. My daughter, Jake just said, can I do something about college affordability? I wish I could, because like many of you on this call, I'm paying full tuition for now one daughter in college. I've not seen any refunds, even though she's not living on campus and even though she's not in classrooms. But one thing that's for certain is she's getting rapid COVID testing done whenever she needs it if she wants to enter campus. 15-minute test comes back immediately. I don't know about all of you. I've had 3 tests. It takes 4 to 5 days to get back. I got to make an appointment. And I think we're better than that. And I'm ashamed and I'm appalled and I'm disappointed that in our country that should have been prepared as the most innovative, wealthy, successful, remarkable country in the world didn't do better. And we have to next time. That's one of my prerogatives. We got to invest in infrastructure. Even in my district, even in Chanhassen, I'm getting reports from families that have students at home that still don't have broadband access, for gosh sakes. Again, this is the United States. We've got to do better and ensure that everybody in this country is connected to the 21st century, and that has got to be a mandate for all of us. Quality, we talked about it earlier, quality education and job training, apprenticeships. How can we open doors to more people and benefit all of your businesses and improve outcomes? It's not rocket science. It just takes intention. And lastly, and perhaps going to be most importantly, we're going to emerge from this with a national debt approaching $30 trillion. It's hard. I don't think I have a calculator. Certainly my iPhone can't accommodate that many zeros. And we're spending over $400 billion just on our debt service now every year. And that's $400 billion from our annual federal budget that can't be deployed as investments in infrastructure and job training and healthcare and education, you name it. We are now spending more on the past. Think about this. We're spending more on America's past than we are investing in its future. And there's not a business on this call that would succeed if you were spending more on the past than you were investing in your future. And that is the same analogy I'll use at the federal level. So we've got to get this under control. And that means a national reckoning about how we match revenue with the needs of our country and not trim programs on which so many rely, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the like. So those are the issues on my list. I don't have answers for all, but I will work hard to listen to ideas from wherever they come. And I hope that all of you are willing to share yours with me, because that's how representation begins. So with that, Shannon, thank you all. Here to listen, learn, take your questions, take your criticisms. And at the end, I just ask that you keep the faith, because we're going to get through this and we're going to do it together. And I'm thankful and grateful to all of you.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. If there is, there's a few things we have learned, is that you are definitely always open to listening and allowing for those innovative ideas to come from all over. So we have lots of questions. I would remind all of our attendees, if you would like a question to go to the Congressman, use the Q&A bar. So at the bottom of your screen, just type in the Q&A, type your question, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So here we go. Can you tell us if Congress is still working on forgiving all the PPP loans under 150,000? Do you think there will be another round of PPP?
Yes, the answer is hopefully, and yes. I'm most certain there will be another round of PPP. My demand is that it be at least as flexible as the bill we passed, the Flexibility Act, because clearly not all businesses are created equal, despite what some in Washington believe. So I want to make sure that all of you who need PPP loans to survive can use it in a way that your business requires, especially businesses that require some form of public gathering, which puts everybody in a very uniquely challenging position. Restaurants, theaters, music venues, retail shops, most difficult right now when we have limitations on congregation. As for forgiveness, yeah, there's a lot of us believe that loans under $150,000, assuming the key components have been met, should be easily forgiven. I don't want to see a 12-page form that has to be filled out. We should make this easy for people. That was the point. This was not to enrich people. This was to keep the doors open, keep payrolls protected. Does that mean that it's perfect? No. Does that mean some businesses who didn't need it got it? Yes. Does that mean there's going to be some fraud? Unfortunately, yes. But the trade-off was clearly in favor of doing so, and I want to see it continue. I don't want to see a new program created that's complicated, that is hard to introduce to the country. So I do expect it'll be something very similar, if not exactly the same, what we had, and allow for businesses that have already received a PPP loan to come back for now a second round, because clearly we did not know how long this would last. And frankly, it should have lasted a lot shorter than it has. So that's where we're at. And we're working on that right now. And there's remarkable bipartisan agreement, particularly on the problem solvers in our conversations with the Chief of Staff in the White House. So I anticipate that'll be a big part of the program.
Great. So selfishly, your thoughts on C6s being added?
Oh my gosh, I forgot to say, like in bold in my notes today, Shannon, was the good news that both sides now agree, both the HEROES Act and the HEALS Act, which was never passed by the Senate, but something that Mitch McConnell kind of put together. Both will afford C6s to participate. I know how important that is. We had been arguing for that for some time, and the answer is I cannot imagine that in the next round that won't be part of it. So yes, that's not selfish at all, by the way.
Oh, well, great. Thank you.
That's called.
Okay. How about an update on protections for liabilities for businesses? I'm sure you're hearing this. I know we're hearing this a lot from our businesses that are very fearful of this, that they take the precautions or what precautions to protect customers and employees during this crisis time.
Yeah. So on that subject of liability protection, you know, I own 4 coffee shops right now, and clearly it requires public gathering to some degree. You know, employees can be at risk, customers can be at risk, and just like all of you, I don't want to see our viral pandemic followed by a pandemic of lawsuits. None of us want to see that. You know, on the other hand, you know, the way the statutes read right now, the threshold is very high. Gross negligence by an enterprise would mean that you are willfully working against your employees or customers and not following laws and regulations. Now, with that said, as you all know, there's never been a federal mandate or even specific guidance, which means every state now is a patchwork of regulations. And I don't envy governors, Democrats or Republicans, who are trying their best to protect people's health and preserve their economies. I know it's difficult. I know the frustration because I share it. And there is a thoughtful middle ground, I believe. I think something time limited that ensures that there will not be frivolous lawsuits as long as you're taking reasonable steps to protect people, that should be something we pursue. Where that falls and how it looks, I can't say for certain. And we also, so what I do think will happen is some enhancement of OSHA regulations and probably enhanced enforcement of what exists rather than some absolute cap on liability. The good news is there is no evidence to indicate right now that there is a flood of lawsuits against enterprises. But I'm mindful of it, and I'm doing my best and will continue to kind of bridge these two schools of thought about protecting individuals and protecting businesses. We can do both. We should do both. It's on my mind, and I think there'll be some thoughtful resolution.
Great, thank you. You spoke a couple of the questions you've spoken a little bit to in your comments, but I'll for the sake of putting them out there, I will. How about any your thoughts on federal help for childcare to assist workers with kids that are not in school full time? This seems to be, I mean, this is a massive, huge emerging issue for us.
Yeah, and I have to say, Shannon, one of the areas of disagreement so far on this COVID relief package is just that. I am joining my Democratic colleagues in arguing vehemently that we need to support not just the childcare providers so they stay open, but also have to provide some subsidy to families who now suddenly are in need of childcare because their kids are at home. And the alternative, of course, is then you leave the labor market and have to take care of your kids. Incomes drop. It's a self-fulfilling negative prophecy. So with that, the answer is yes, we are working hard on that. I believe we're finding some middle ground right now, my working group. But it is a complicated one. There's no question. But I want to let you all know we are very cognizant of it. And unfortunately, this is where time does matter, and the fact the delay is making a difference. Now that schools are starting to reopen, many colleagues who were very opposed to childcare subsidies are recognizing, because they're hearing from their constituents, that they're in impossible circumstances, with kids having to stay at home, not being able to go to work, and what is the alternative? And as you all know, childcare is not inexpensive. Especially for lower wage workers, many of whom are probably employees of your respective enterprises. So that's how I think we as a federal government can and should be supportive so that your employees can come back to work and their kids can be taken care of in a safe environment. And then as we emerge from this, we should reduce the subsidies and get people back to work and kids back in school. I want to see kids in school just like everybody else, and I want to do it safely. I think it's in the country's best interest. And once again, we've had COVID in our country now for the better part of 2020. We're going on over 8 months. We had plenty of time to prepare for this, and I just am dumbfounded from an executive perspective. I'm dumbfounded how we have so woefully dropped the ball on preparation and find ourselves in this predicament. So on that, I extend apologies, but rest assured, working to rectify it.
Great. So on kind of in a similar vein around balance, how are you, give some thoughts about balancing extended unemployment benefit with the need to bring workers back to work and the fact that we've got many companies that cannot fill open jobs? Yeah.
So you all know $600 a week is a $15 hourly wage, something that many believe we should move to. I've been an advocate for some regional components because recognizing that cost of living is very different in different parts of the country, and some businesses simply can't afford a dramatic increase in the minimum wage. But I also want to see everybody who works hard to do well. So the $600 amplified UI benefit clearly meant that some people were making more staying home than they were on their jobs. I don't like that. That's not good strategy long-term. I can't imagine anybody would say it is. However, in light of the circumstances, keeping rents paid and food on the table, to me, it was a terribly important thing to do. In fact, there was Republican and Democratic endorsement of it, as evidenced by the fact the CARES Act passed so expeditiously. Yes, am I hearing of businesses, even nonprofits, that are struggling to get people to come back because the sense is that there's a disincentive? Yes. You also all know that if you're laid off or furloughed and on unemployment, and your employer offers your job back, legally you cannot stay on unemployment. But none of us as business owners want to be in the position, of course, to put our employees in that position, or frankly turn them in to the authorities. So I recognize that social dynamic as well. So I do think, Shannon, the middle, kind of the compromise ground is a reduced but still amplified unemployment benefit, because the alternative is foreclosures, people not being able to pay rent. And like I said, we need money in the economy driving consumption. And if that dries up, a lot of the businesses, all of you on this call, are going to suffer from that. So I'm really trying to balance the two. And no policy is perfect. I recognize the issues associated with an enhanced benefit, but I do believe that extra money in the economy right now ultimately will protect a lot of jobs and a lot of your businesses. And frankly, even some of the best conservative minds in the country are like-minded on that subject. And that's why, the Republican platform has long been tax cuts mean more money in pockets, which means more spending. This is the same notion. It's just, it's not a tax cut. It's simply direct payments to people so they can spend it. And of course, those who are on unemployment tend to spend most of their checks versus more wealthy Americans who would tend to save it. So that's how I'm looking at it. I do believe the compromise, like I said, will be somewhere in the maybe $450 to $500 range, which will be a reduction, but still slightly amplified.
Okay, thanks. There's two questions, similar questions. You spoke a little about the national debt, but understanding that we're still in a state of emergency, is there concern among your colleagues about the financial impact of our skyrocketing national debt? And then what's the formula for reducing the huge debt payment?
Well, Shannon, the truth is there are too few people in Washington, in Congress, that have ever managed a business, that have ever looked at a P&L, could even read a balance sheet, and frankly, who even care. There are even some who believe in modern monetary theory, which says the Treasury can just keep printing money and distributing it, and it won't make a difference. We'll never see inflation. And thank goodness we have low interest rates and almost no inflation right now, because we would be in a real pickle if we had high inflation like we had in the 80s with the debt load that we're now looking at. Not enough people do care about it. And that's a problem, because I think, as many of you on this call know, ultimately it will not be our decision. It'll be in international investors when they decide that the United States of America is no longer the safest place to deploy capital. And when the United States dollar is no longer the reserve currency. Those two are outside of our control. And that's the international community's prerogative. If that decision is made, we'll never recapture our standing in the world economy. And I want to prevent that. And that means once we emerge from this, and yes, we've got to spend now. There's no question whatsoever. This is not the time to penny pinch. This is the time to flood the markets with liquidity, and doing anything but that would be a dereliction of duty. As we move forward, yeah, we've got to look at revenue generation and our expenditures. And we got to look at big buckets. I'll take the defense budget. We spend $740 billion a year on our national defense. That's more than the entire federal budget of the Russian Federation. $740 billion a year. That's more than the 9 next nations combined, including China and Russia and the European Union. $740 billion a year for national defense. Yet we can't defend against a virus that we knew was coming. Yet we can't seem to defend against cyber attacks that are coming all the time. So my question is, can we not do better by being more strategic with perhaps a little bit less? Use some of that money to invest in education and workforce development and infrastructure? I think the answer is yes. How we deploy the resources that we have in our country is as much a part of the question as how we generate more revenue. And we've got to become more efficient. There's just no question whatsoever. And that is my mission as a business-minded Democrat, to make sure that opportunity is available to people, but that we do so in a fiscally responsible manner so that my children and your children and grandchildren are not paying the ultimate price, which is the relegation of the United States to a second-tier nation in the world. And I think we're going to be facing that precipice sooner than we think. I will say the good news are I'm working with people like Senator Mitt Romney, who's created a program called the Trust Act, which would develop 5 independent commissions to study the various trust funds that finance Medicare, Social Security. Because if we don't address those now, they're going to run out of money in 2030, 2035. And the time to do it is now. And this does not mean cutting programs. It means how are we going to thoughtfully find efficiencies and generate the revenue necessary, just like all of you have to do. So the only difference is there's not a business in this country that has a debt load, of course, like the federal government. So those are my opening thoughts. There is no alternative. Ignoring it is not a possibility. But I will close by saying, until we change the political reward system to actually accrue some benefit to members of Congress who are willing to acknowledge these truths, we keep rewarding the spending. There's nobody in Congress who gets rewarded from cutting programs or raising your taxes. They get thrown out of office for doing so. So our political incentives are working against the need to be more thoughtful relative to our national spending and debt loads. And that's just the darn truth.
I have 2 final questions. The first is, how likely is the deadline to expend the CARES dollars past December? How likely is that? One thing that we're seeing with our local governments, our counties, our cities, that money is vital for us to revitalize the economy, and sending it back to Washington isn't going to do us any good. So any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. I just met with some mayors last week, of course, hearing from all of the communities in our district and beyond about these needs. Look, if federal dollars don't flow to states and municipalities, only 2 things can happen: massive tax increases for everybody, or a massive cut in services and employment, public service employees. Those are the options. And some money remains in the CARES Act. What I anticipate, Shannon, will happen is that money will be amplified with new money flowing into states. Democrats' proposition was $915 billion shared nationally. Republicans' opening salvo was about $150 billion. As you would expect, I think there will be some meeting somewhere in the middle there. The Problem Solvers Caucus, including me, endorsed a bill by Republican Senator Cassidy from Louisiana and Senator Menendez, Democrat, that would be a $500 billion state and municipal and county support act with a very thoughtful mechanism for how it's distributed. We don't want to bail out pension plans that were poorly funded by states. We don't want to reward states that were poorly managed. We do want to reward states like Minnesota that were well managed. We had a 2.5, we had a budget surplus that has turned into a massive deficit now. And we're an example of a state that does it better than most. And we should be rewarded, not punished for that. So the answer is yes, there will be, and that's what's holding up this bill right now, is that negotiation on these details. There will be amplified state and local funding somehow, some way. And if for some reason we can't get it together during the Trump administration and Joe Biden wins in November, rest assured, as soon as January 21st, there will be some retroactive support for states, because the alternative is not something we should consider.
Okay. Final question, just for time's sake. Do you agree with the notion that politics is downstream of culture, and that many of our divisions as a nation are more cultural than political?
I spend a lot of time listening, and instead of condemning people, trying to understand people. And when I say I love everybody I represent, and I mean it sincerely. And I think that starts with us. Congress is a representation of the country, and we choose who we send to this body, and it is our job. We're the board of directors as constituents to members of Congress. We can hire and fire them. And frankly, I wish people elevated the intention to be respectful and collaborative, more than the commitment to absolutism. Congress is not a place for absolutists. It doesn't work. It's not designed for that. The president in an executive position can be. Legislators cannot. Legislators on the call know that even better than I do. And I think the best way to answer that, Shannon, is we each play a role in that. The way that we treat people who see things differently than we do, the way that we deploy respect starts with all of us. Congress can't legislate decency, but we all can live by that golden rule, if you will. And I do believe in no small way that our adversaries, foreign adversaries, have played a much more significant role in these divisions than we could ever have imagined. I'm seeing the intelligence. I see how social media has been manipulated by foreign actors to divide us. It's as simple as that. And I want you to know that because we're at war and we're the soldiers. Every single one of us is a soldier fighting against this misinformation and disinformation. Whether it's QAnon, whether it is racial divisions. Our adversaries know how to do it and they're doing it well, and they see how we respond, and it's going to get worse. So we have two choices. Either devolve into what could be another horrific civil conflict in some form, or rise above it. And when I call us all soldiers, I mean it sincerely. We've got to band together here and elevate our common sense above the nonsense. And my hope and expectation is that in the next Congress and the next administration, that we will see a very different tone that will be more inclusive, that will be more respectful of various positions and perspectives, and focus on uniting this country, because but it takes all of us, and that's my expectation. So with that, I know we're reaching the top of the hour, Shannon. I want to say thank you. I've learned so much. I so value my relationship with the Twin West Chamber. I cannot wait for the merger. Squeaky wheels get the grease, and there'll be more squeaking as a unified coalition. And I want to ask you to keep educating me. Many of you reach out offline. I love getting together at these events. I wish we were together physically. And I want to say thank you and keep the faith. I am so grateful to be part of this remarkable community because of all of you. And I think the change that the country needs is going to start right here in Minnesota. The way that we treat one another, the way that we bridge gaps, the way the public and private sector collaborate, to me is the model for the country. And I'd like to see it start with all of us, and that be our collective legacy. So let's onwards.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. Obviously, we are so thankful for your leadership and your pragmatic approach, as well as your true collaborative spirit. When we talk about collaboration, that is one thing that you can see in everything that you do as you reach both sides of the aisle, and the great work that you're doing up there in DC to represent us. So a couple things as we close out. Next month on September 11th, our Issues and Insights is all on healthcare. So we'll have senior leadership from Mayo and Alina joining us to talk really through healthcare, currently where we're at, but also what some foresight looks like for the future for the state of Minnesota. I would also reference, for those of you that are interested, due to the fact that we can't travel in person, with the Minnesota Chamber, we are doing a virtual DC fly-in. So on September 16th, we'll have even more opportunity to have dialogue with all of our leadership in DC. So if you are interested in joining the Minnesota Chamber and many of us across the state on September 16th in the afternoon, you can check out the Minnesota Chamber website for that as well. On that note, we'll continue working hard on your behalf. We do this with insight from all of you. So to all of our cities, counties, state leadership, thank you for your continued partnership. Thank you for open ears as we approach and really try to revitalize this economy stronger than it was before. I wish you all the best, safety and health to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.